does music become part of the humanities, anyone? Anyone?
Storytelling.
Storytelling. What does it tell you? What does the humanity, for music to be part of the humanities, what does it have to do according to the Council for the Humanities? It has to say something about the human condition. You have to think about the music, and you have to think how that helps to explain the human condition, or helps to make you think about your life and helps to explicate your life. And much music does that. Most music does that. And all it is reflecting about that. And really that's what the panel does. It reflects about the significance of changes that occurred at the particular time that we're talking about. And today we're talking about, or a particular group in this case, we're talking about the Alii and their compositions and why they composed the way they did and what their music said. So with that, I'm going to introduce Aaron Mahi, who is our humanities consultant and scholar for our series, and Aaron will introduce everyone else. Aaron.
Mahalo nui Tom. As is our tradition, I'd like to do a oli, which it's not a, I wouldn't say contemporary, but it was written in this time. I guess that's the definition for contemporary. It is a oli which refers to wait, hold on. Maybe I'll go this side. Yeah. I hear the birds are chirping behind us. No, the manu, kani kamalu. That's okay. Pa'abo, you know, real pa'akpo. Yeah. So this is a oli which makes references to the many things that that befall us. The waves may be great and high, but we see through them and we know how to dodge them for those that know how to surf. The wind might blow especially strong and prevent you from moving forward. But then again, when you keep your eyes single to all these many things, you will endure. And then, of course, the word that came to us by not only our kupuna, but also those of the missionaries that came here. The Yaunalio, we say in Hawaiian, the word of the angels that spoke of the birth of Christ, and how that has given us our faith to move forward. It is written by a very good composer, a very good friend of mine who we work together with partners in development, Iokepa de Santos. And I thought I would use that to start off today. Ike ikanalu nui o ke kaimoana o na mea like ole. A o he pu, a o he ke ala polole, ke ola pono e. A mahi kamakani me lulu, o na wahi ke ole. A o he pu, a o he ke ala polole, ke ola pono e. Hai hoi ka e au na leo e nau leli o nambua li ke ole. A o he pu, a o he ke ala polole, ke ola pono e. It gives me pleasure to come before you. This evening we're going to speak about the Mele of our Alii, more importantly known the four heavenly ones. In Hawaiian we say Na Lani Eha. They are of the line of the famous families that aided many of our chiefs to achieve their goals when bringing their islands together, especially Kamehameha. Many of you know of the two uncles, the twins. Kamanawa was the grandfather of Nalani Eha. They shared it in terms of the Niaupio, we say in Hawaiian. when the blood relatives are very close in relationship. And in this case, Kapakea, Caesar is known as the father, and Anna Kehokalole came together and gave birth to these 3 children. In the tradition of our Hawaiian people, they were not only raised by Keana and Kapakea, but they were also came under the tutelage and also the Hanai system. One Ke'e Likolani, she had nurtured the youngest of the 4. This is, of course, Lile Iohoku. And then our Lili Wokolani. She was raised by cousins of Abnepaki and Konia. And so the royal line that they come from is indeed an important one to note, and of which we're going to be sharing tonight with our panelists. They were wonderful composers, and tonight we'll also talk about that. I have to my right here, my far right will be, of course, our sister Kuuipo Kumukahi, wonderful keiki o ka'aina of Hawaii, recording artist, and holds up the real elements of these 4, Nalani Eha. In fact, she has a group by the name of Nalani Eha, and she also named a civic club which she sponsored, and several of her good friends by the same name, Nalani Eha. And so, shall we welcome, please, Kuuipo Kumukahi. And also my right, he is no stranger to us, and is a wonderful, wonderful friend, and now here in Hawaii, and passing on the wisdom and knowledge of our traditional ways to our students, our hamana over there at Windward Community College. We have our brother Kaala Carmack, and he is here to of course share more about the lives of our Nalani Eha. Before we, as we continue, I gotta take Aaron Salah's place, so and take my place too, because we have to divvy out 4 of them over the 4 of us, which was easy. Now it's three of us to have the 4, and so yeah, really, let's go tuck 4. Anyway, so I'll take my seat over there, and then we'll start. But I could be moving over there. Let's start with Ipo. You want to share with us first a little bit about yourself, and then a little bit about your relationship with the music of and the lives of Nalani Eha.
Mahalo, Aaron. It is a great honor for me to be here this evening to share what I've experienced so far in my life through music. Music, I was conditioned by my mother that music was simply a hobby. I had to get a real job in order to play music, which is what I've done. By my hobby and by my great love and passion, I do perform Hawaiian music, and I want to say that it is traditional, although sometimes we get into a little bit of more swing and jazz stuff, and it makes it very interesting. But nevertheless, our people were very good at what they did as far as music was concerned throughout time. What I do in the daytime is I am a residential coordinator with the ARC in Hawaii. We serve adults with developmental and intellectual disabilities. So I talk about the human condition. I approach it from both sides, through caring, on hands, and of course performing the music, which touches spirit and heart of people. I'd like to also mention that Aaron pointed to the fact that I have a group named Nalani Eha, and I just have to say, no, I'm with the Hawaiian Music Hall of Fame, and the group that the president had created was a group known as the Hawaiian Music Hall of Fame Serenaders. But what we did is in 2007 we recorded an album entitled Nalani Eha. What was interesting about this journey was that I had the graphic artist, she and I went to the archives, and it was so funny because we took the pictures, we asked for the pictures of the Nalani Eha, and we took the pictures out of, that plastic thing, and she shot photos of it, and by the last photo, after we caught the last photo, we got scolding for taking it out of the plastic. And we just said, oops, too late. So what she did was graphically put it together, and I think it is the only graphic composition of all 4 siblings in one photo, or one graphic approach. And we used that as our cover, of course. And so I kept a picture above my computer, and every time I sat at the computer to look at lyrics, I just could see them looking at me and saying, do the right thing. Okay, so unlike most record producers who tell you, record and put out the first song should be the most popular one, the one that hit the charts. I said no. First of all, we approached the music with pure simplicity. We let the lyrics be the beauty, not the music. Because for Hawaiians, it's the lyrics that's more important than the music itself. And when I laid it out into the track listing, I started with Kuuipo No'i, and I closed with the Queen's Prayer, which would be something I would do in a performance. So regardless of what producers said, I didn't listen. Because I was once told, if it's good, people can buy them anyway. True. 2008, we went to the Hokus, and it was the first time in the history of the Hawaii Academy of Recording Arts that any non-profit organization walked away with the highest award, which was the Album of the Year. And so we were very proud of that. And what was very interesting about the entire night, the first on TV, live television that was announced was the graphics of the year. The album won graphics of the year. So we go through the whole night, and Hokuzuda Meister keeps winning, Hokuzuda Meister keeps winning, Hokuzuda Meister keeps winning. He's a dear friend. When it came to the end, Kimo Stone, the president of the organization, was standing up to go home, and they announced Nalani Eha, Hawaii Music Hall of Fame, and I just said, get to the stage! And he was like, what's going on here? So what started the evening, closed the evening, Nalani Eha. That was significant to me. It's just like the album list of songs. Kuuipo No'i, the national pride, and the Queen's Prayer, her sorrow, but asking God forgiveness for the people who did her wrong. It was very significant. So that's the history of me, and enough talking. Too much vala'au already. Thank you, mahalo.
Brother Kaala.
Hello. I'm glad to hear that story, sister. That's great. My name is Kaala, and I've been gone for years. I've been living in San Francisco for maybe the last 35 years. Before that, I was in Indiana, but you take the Hawaii with you wherever you go. One of these days, I'm gonna pull out my father's slides, because there are pictures of us pulling a pig out of the ground in Panama and in Japan, because it didn't matter where we were. And even in Japan, my auntie Lina Machado came and toured, and my grandmother, her first cousin, happened to be there, and she came up after with her band, and everywhere in Japan, but just Kanikapila all night long. It's just how that goes. And I was in the Navy, and I came back in 1971, and this is my entry into Nalani Eha, because I was told that they were having an audition at Kennedy Theater for this performance of John Dominus Holt's play Famous Are the Flowers, which is a translation of Kaulana Napua. And I had just gotten out of the Navy in December of 1970. Now here is like March of 71. It's like 3 months later, and I got the part of being the hakumele for this play. It was supported by a lot of I think Princess Pomai Kealani was very supportive of the production, anyway, it was a very heady experience for me because I was the only Hawaiian on the stage, and I didn't really think about how important it was until people were, standing on their seats, screaming and crying, because in June of 1971, it was at a time when nobody spoke about what happened to the Queen and how she was deposed. It was a source of shame. My grandmother, like a lot of people's grandparents, were punished for speaking Hawaiian, that sort of thing, and then their children, my mother's generation, the in-between generation, they all didn't speak Hawaiian because their parents were punished for speaking Hawaiian. So the whole thing about being Hawaiian was just kind of sublimated, if you will. And then we went through World War II, and then in the 60s with the Civil Rights Movement, and then right at the end of that, then Hawaii sort of was, I don't want to say woke up, but all of a sudden this play became like a rallying point, I think, for a lot of people. And there was only 6 nights, but it was really well, it was certainly a turning point in my life, because I had always played Hawaiian music since I was younger, because I feel very blessed to have been raised in a musical Hawaiian family. But, it wasn't about going out and playing in Waikiki. Not that there's anything wrong with that, not that I haven't done that too, but we didn't have to, because we'd get together and there was always 3 things we did. We ate, or we gambled, or we played music. And usually it all happened at the same time. So, like I say, having been thrust into this scene in Hawaii here back in what we call now the Renaissance of Hawaiian music, who knew at the time? All I knew it was, like I say, a changing part in my life, just to have been able to sing these songs, because it was 3 acts, and the play is all about using the words of the people at that time and making a debate between a Hawaiian historian and a Hale historian, and the woman stepped forward and told stories as the Queen, and I was the haku mele, chanted and sang underneath it. And so now we are 40 years later, and my mother sent me this book, which I strongly recommend. I think of all the song, the poor Nalaniha, that is, the composers we're talking about, I think the Queen is the only one that actually has a whole songbook. So it's, when I got it, I thought I was a performer, and that's what I got the song for, or that's why I got the book. But now that I have this opportunity to share my mana'o, all of a sudden I'm looking at it with different eyes and have some stories to tell. But that's the next thing, because I'm just talking about leading me up to why it is that I'm here. So, and I'll say one last thing is that I'm wearing this kihei because I just came from the commencement at Windward Community College, and I feel wonderful to be there and seeing all these young Hawaiians walking across the stage, chanting, singing, but getting their degrees. So I really feel wonderful feelings for what they're doing to better themselves, and I feel very humbled to be part of that as well. So.
When we were meeting a couple of weeks before tonight's presentation, what we thought we'd do was divide up and give a little bit of maybe about 5 to 6 minutes introduction to the individuals that comprised of the Nalani Eha. For those that don't know, those 4, 2 of them led our nation in the latter part of our kingdom. King Kalakaua was the eldest. Next was his heir apparent to the throne, which was Liliuokalani Leiokamakaeha. And many of you know about their lives. And then after that, there's a younger sibling by the name of Miriam Like. She was wed to Scott Cleghorn. You may know about the Cleghorn establishment as far as their works with business here in Hawaii. And then the last of the 4 was Leleiohoku. William Pitt was the English name that was given him, but I think of him always as Leleiohoku. And so each of us were going to share a little about each of their lives, and more, not so much about their lives, but more about their composition, because that's what we wanted to talk about tonight. Later on this evening, you'll have that opportunity to hear their compositions, but we wanted to spend a little bit of time in talking about their differences, their likenesses, and the relationship that they shared in, and oftentimes would find a lot of conflict and battle each other. Thank God we didn't have the kind of litigation that goes on now, but there was a lot of that going on when they had their activities and their competition. We say Mele, Kuuipo, that was a song contest, and they were the ones that really started all of that, amongst our Hawaiian people, and we still have that tradition today. And so we're going to start with the youngest of the siblings, and this is Lele Iohoku, and I present to you Kuuipo Kumukahi.
It was funny because when he asked, he said, we have the list, and he said, well, I think Aaron took Kalakaua and Kaala took Lili Uokalani, and I was thinking, that's the two easy ones. But nevertheless, yeah, I know. But more importantly, I think for me, when recording the album Nalani Eha, I realized that the music and the composition of William Pitt Leleohoku was the most interesting to me. Simply because, I don't know how to really explain this, but I will try, is the words that he uses and the way and the phrasing, I'm sure, has changed throughout time, feels really good in the mouth. It's the way it comes out, or the way it starts to connect itself. And if you look at some of the compositions that he has written, you can see a thread of a lot of these vowels, same vowels in lines. And possibly, if you took a Hakumele class, you will know that poetry is one way, or is for us as Hawaiians, because we are people of an oral tradition. The memory bank had to be super huge, because we had to remember everything from building a house to carving a canoe to navigation to fishing, farming, and everything. So poetry helps to keep the memory, or to keep the memory line moving, because there's connecting words and so on and so forth that you could learn in a Hakumele class. But in the case of Leleohoku, much of his compositions really reflect his time, because this guy wrote a lot of love songs. And when you're involved with Hawaiian music and hula, the first thing you think of is like, who is that? Who is this person talking about? Who is the composer talking about? But that's not for us to know. It's really for us to, because Hawaiian compositions are filled with imagination. But, we're pretty good at that, to make symbolism. Yeah, Aaron? And we can tell you more stories about that, though. The history of Prince Leleohoku it was because of him that joined the Kalakaua and the Kamehameha family. There was a time when the Kalakaua family felt that it was no longer necessary for the Kamehamehas to continue the monarchy. But because Princess Ruth Ke'elikolani hanai Leleohoku with the permission of Ke'ohokalole and Kapa'akea, that was the joining point. Because when she took Leleohoku and raised him, she had already been saddened by the loss of her own child, plus the loss of her husband, and she had pilikia with another one of her husbands. And so this young boy made her happy. She just put everything on him, bought him a carriage, let him holo in downtown Honolulu, do this, do that. So it was his job to just simply make her happy. So his compositions reflect all this happiness, plus his own, I believe, when he's growing up, all these little love things that were going on with him, and I'm sure somebody else, or of someone he knew. For example, in the song Kekaupu, it talks about the albatross bird. Another word for albatross is the goonie bird. So must be that person he was writing about is pretty much a goonie. So, the symbolisms used are very interesting. But again, going back to how he wrote, and it is said that his siblings felt that he was the most advanced in composition. But again, died at a very young age, at the age of 28, or 23 or 28, I believe. So in his 20s. So in that short amount of time, it seemed like the lifetime of the amount of music or compositions that were written would have been, I think in our time today, probably a 60, 70-year-old person, because it was just a lot of things in a short amount of time, but so much information through music, through compositions. I also want to say that in doing the album Nalani Eha, we realized, because we did it in 2007, in 2008 it went to the Hokus, but we realized that for our Alii, for our people, I should say, composition was of the highest skill of leadership. We sat in the recording studio, myself, Isaac Acuna, Kimo Stone, Uncle Joe Winchester, and we said and Kimo actually, the credit goes to him, he said, "Hey, you guys know of any sovereigns that wrote for their nation?" And we're thinking, well, we know Bush didn't. And we're thinking, who, what leader? We couldn't think, because the Europeans, they paid people to do their work. We don't know about Asia, probably something similar, but these were the rulers of Hawaii, and it goes back. History tells us that it goes back to the time of Kamehameha, that they wrote poetry, hakumele. And so when we perform in Waikiki, and a lot of people say, Waikiki, we cannot afford. We don't like go down there, that's tourist trap. What's important to remember is when the visitor walks on our shores, they need to know. They need to know. They've gone too long without knowing. When they hear Hawaiian music, it's just not a Hollywood approach. This music, or the mele, the lyrics in there, are just not for entertainment. They are true documentation of the lifestyle of our people, of our land, of the events that went on, of people. I don't know of any other culture that does it this way. We do. And I want to just expand a little bit. Our Alii were so benevolent to their people. They knew they were one with the people, not any higher or lower. We were all together. We needed to survive. So before the United States ever had health care, Hawaii had it, with the Queen's Medical Center being built by Queen Emma and Kamehameha IV, and then Kalakau and Kapiolani with Kapiolani's Children and Women's Center. And then, of course, finally, amongst all of them, for education, Pauahi in 1887 found the Kamehameha schools. So our people knew. They were ahead of their time, way ahead of their time. And we, today, continue to be the beneficiaries. And all through music, education, and healthcare. All right.
I'm going to divide myself in half because I had Miriam Like, and then I'm going to turn it over to Brother Kaala, who was Lili'u, and then come back to me to do Kalakaua. When we think of Miriam Like, Miriam Like to me is a very she was one that always had to be cared for by her kua'ana, we say in Hawaiian. In Hawaiian, you either the eldest child, one that is ahead, the eldest, and then when you come down to those that are your younger siblings, we use the word ka'ana, kaikaina, kaikaina. And so Miriam Like is a kaikaina to Lili'u. And she was not only the younger sibling, but she was also endeared by Lili'u. Liliu had a name for her, and her name was called Kapoli. Poli, you know, is the bosom. And so when Miriam Likelike wrote her songs, her poetry, she would put Kapoli, which was the favorite name of her kua'ana, the sister. And so endearing was that relationship. I mean, it gave birth to so many of the compositions of Liliu. But her own compositions, I have to say, just as likened to Liliu Hoku, they were songs of endearment, songs, again, of love, songs of the intensity of the relationship, of that love relationship. She would use wonderful, what do you call, idioms that speak just as much as Liliu Hoku. I like Liliu Hoku. I wish I could talk about him. But let's talk about Miriam. Miriam is she never writes about things that are as when we compare her poetry, they deal with the wonder and the beauty of life. Those things that are in nature that surround us, that remind us who we are as the children of Hawaii. I'll give one real quick example. She wrote a song about their family home, down in the Waikiki area. You folks know Ainahau. And that, and of course, the home there, which the land was actually passed down to Liliu through their mother, Anna Ke'okalole. She writes about the typical aspects of a home, the things that surround the home. Nakawai lukini, wai anuhea, karose. Oh, how the waterways that surround us over there in Waikiki, and then how these beautiful rose gardens that surround the house, and how the scent of that rose just brings so much comfort. I know that where the house was positioned was in a certain part of where the certain winds that come down. Liliu speaks about those winds in her song called Ahilam Makani. Kapoli, Miriam, speaks about how that house is nestled within the beauty and all the different scent. The scent of the rose, the flowers, the scent of the ocean. Na kamakani ahi paamai makai. In the evening when the ocean winds come off the shore there, yeah. For those that grew up in Waikiki and know your Waikiki, there's the lipoa. And when that seaweed, that particular seaweed is in the growth, around July, and all the fish come to eat, especially the nui. Then the nui comes in and eat that seaweed because, it's so ono for them. And we like that lipoa too. We eat that for those who know lipoa. How it has that little bit of the acidic taste, but yet still sweet, yeah? And so she writes about that. She writes about how the lipoa, and right away you're in Waikiki. You know already. That's the kind of sensitivity I always believe that when Miriam writes her Mele, she thinks about those kinds of things that make my life comfortable, make my life enjoyable, make my life relaxed. She had a problem. She'd fall in love with any good-looking guy. And sister said that's not a problem. But anyway, she would and so a lot of times Liliu had to kind of protect her, the song Sanoe, right? That Sanoe, that song. That was about when those captains were all those young, handsome Italian guys were off that ship over there was being hosted by Liliu, and then she falls in love with one of them, and they go off to the side, and she's trying to keep her position. Oh boy, my sister, there she goes again, and she has to stop her, counsel her. She said, don't let your heart go so easy. Any Boyd family members here? Anybody from the Boyd family? No Boyd family members here? I see everybody smiling though. Okay, well.
Mother's not here.
That's what inspired that. Aloha Oi. She fell in love with the son, Captain Boyd, his son, the boy, when they're over there having their, they always get together. Where are those two? And that was the heart of Miriam. Very soft, very always, what you say, compatible to those things that take the heart, And so her music always reflects that when you read through her poetry. And boy, she's smitten so easily. I think that's how I would compare her music and her compositions. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of those compositions. We have very few. In the Puki Mele Hawaii, when you see Kapoli, and there's several of them there, those are all that we know we have at this point. I know when Kumukahi was doing some research with anti-patients Bacon Namaka over at the museum, they had discovered some other of the song of Mele. Unfortunately, we don't have the air, we don't have the melody because they didn't write it down. And Kaala will talk about that when we come to Lili'u. But if I were to think about Miriam, that's how I would characterize her love for life, her love to enjoy the beauty of the surroundings of which she found herself, and her poetry really reflected that. And we're gonna, when we sing her songs tonight, we'll hopefully you'll be able to discover that. Mahalo.
While you were talking about Like Like, I was thinking of that more recent song, Falling in Love with Love is Falling for Make-Believe. Sort of what you're reminding me of.
Yeah,
but
that's a good point.
At any rate, Queen Liliuokalani, she had a lot of things on her side in terms of how it was that she's the most prolific of the four of the Nalani Eha. I mean, it was unfortunate that her favorite sibling passed away at the age of 22, and then her sister, she was like 30, maybe 36, and even her brother Kalakao, he was 54. But she had not only the nature, meaning she had been given a large dose of talent through the gene pool, and she had the privileges of the Alii, so she went to the best schools and had also these mysterious Haole music teachers when she finished school with her as well, and eventually she also had Henry Berger. So she, like I say, was privileged. She was an Alii, so she was able to nurture her own gift for composition, which she always tells us is that composing for her was very much like breathing. It wasn't anything that wasn't work. But she had two other things besides the longevity, which is I'm referring to. But the other thing that I think is probably the most important was that she had a very strong faith in God and in the goodness of humanity. I mean, like we referred to the Queen's Prayer, she was asking God to forgive them for what they did. I mean, and she wrote letters to the presidents of the United States. I know you're gonna set this right and do the right thing. So she really felt in her heart that people were going to do what was right, and even more to the point, when she was imprisoned in Iolani Palace. Now, a person maybe of less spunk maybe would maybe sit there and not do anything and just feel wronged for what was happening to her, but she didn't. She used that as an opportunity for her to compose, and she wrote some of the most beautiful tunes or songs, Mele, while she was in prison, and which leads me to where I was in somewhat of a quandary trying to figure out how in 7 minutes which songs or which one song am I going to talk about, because she was so prolific and she lived such a long life, and she lived through several of the most difficult times in the history of Hawaii. But I think, like I say, having had this opportunity to re-examine some of what was written in this book, I was focusing kind of just on the beginning of her life as a composer, where in the 1860s and the 1870s, where she, like her siblings, was writing songs that were happy, love songs. But even at that time, she was also writing, she was starting to get the taste of political life in Honolulu. And she wrote Mele Hawaii during that time, you know, which was the first, well, the second of our national anthems. It was, you know, was King Kalakau came 10 years later and supplanted it with his own composition, which we still sing today, Hawaii Pono'i. But like I say, as the 60s came to a close, she was already embroiled in some of the political life in Honolulu. And what she did, much of the songs, with I guess the word is strophic in the 60s. You know, they were the same tune, but different words. That's the only thing that would differentiate it. And sometimes the hui, the chorus, was also the same tune as well. Then she gets into the 70s and she really stays in that vein. It is all about making the message of the song what is the most important thing, the poetry. And much more of the songs were about the political situation at the time. And here's a song that Don't lean on the table, Kaala. Can you really tell I'm into this? Right? At any rate, you know, like I say, having had this opportunity to re-examine this book, I found this song, which is called Kahai Kalaunu, which I didn't know. You folks know that song?
I know of this song.
This song, what she's saying in this song, again with the idea of this being a political statement, she's actually very proud of the fact that King Kalakaua has just been elected king over Queen Emma. Of course, if you know Hawaiian history, there was some rioting going on in Honolulu because the supporters of Queen Emma didn't like that Kalakaua won, you know. So she writes this song, and she's saying, "The woman of the mountain boasts that she would like to have the clouds in the sky. She grasps the thing that she desires to adorn the body, to make it beautiful. The crown of the kingdom is for the 4 ruling chiefs. This royal flag is theirs. Forever may it wave." There's 2 more verses, but clearly what she's saying is here, she's proud of the fact that her family is now the ruling class. I guess what you were referring to about how the Kamehamehas have been supplanted by now the Kalakaua, the Nalaniha. So I would have sung this, but it's hard to have unless let me borrow your ukulele, may I? Can't just talk about music. We got a music too, right? Isn't that what Charles Seger told us once upon a time? So, Kalamai. All right. That's good enough. Okay, all right, it goes like this. I'm holding this up like this. Okay. She's saying she's beautiful. She's a book. What do you call it? Stand. Book stand. There you go. Kaina hinyo ke kuahivi kukui kiko i kalani la opo i kam mealia ai i kaliko no ke kino e nani e o ka vehi kalaunu o ke aupuni no nalani e ha i ka moku Naglako nanighay kalaunu e maulo akam nanibelo ana.
Now, I will lead right into Kalakaua with that. Kahai Kalaunu means the crown, the royal standard. Many of you, when you go to attend the proceedings of the celebration of King Kalakaua's birthday, which is of course always around November 16th, you see on the palace there are two flags. One on the left is the Hawaiian flag that we know today, and the one on the right is called that Kahai Kalaunu. It is the royal standard that we call it. And that is the flag that represents Kalakaua's dynasty. Now Kalakaua, from his composition, I think one of the most well-known that we know of is Hawaii Pono'i. And during that time when he writes Hawaii Pono'i, he is not the king. And this is while he was serving as the Secretary of State for of course King Kamehameha V. And several offerings were made to King Kamehameha V about where can we find a suitable national anthem for our Hawaiian people. And so several entries come in, one from Liliu, of course, Kalahui Hawaii, and that one is the one which, of course, at the onset, from I think when we understand the story, Kamehameha V does not really accept that particular one, doesn't choose it. But he's especially moved by Kalakaua's Hawaii Pono'i. And why so? And notwithstanding that Liliu's poetry and her addressing the nation was something that was far-fetched, but was more important to note that Kalakaua keeps it to, of course, the 3 verses. And those 3 verses, first of all, address Hawaii Pono'i, Nana Iko Mo'i. So all of us, the true believers of Hawaii, let's look to our king, our chief, yeah? And then, of course, when the verse goes into that hui section, yeah? Makua lani e Kamehameha e nakaua e pale. Now, nakaua, everybody says that's the war, but really no. Nakaua, you and I, as Kamehameha did when he battled. And that's why I think a lot really like this one, because he got right into the meat of the matter. Because what happened was that King Kamehameha couldn't unite us unless he went into battle. And so nakaua e pale, you and I, let's take the pale, which is that battle which with all the different shakti and the dog teeth, and that you ward off the spears when the spears are being thrown in your direction. Meka ihe, with the spear. After that he says, now, how about Iponui? Now, who are you going to look at? You're going to look at your chiefly lines. The chiefly, Alii. Yeah? And then you look at the siblings that come. Napoki'i, Muliko. Yeah? And then those are the young ones, the young chiefs that come along. And you have to look at them. These are going to be the lines. I don't think Kamehameha knew that after Pauahi he would not continue the Kamehameha dynasty. So we must already prepare for those of the Alii lines which will continue. And that's the kind of prophecy I think Kalakaua saw in that second verse. The last verse, what does Kalakaua say? Haba ipono'i nan aya? Na ikalahui. Now we are a nation. Okay, we're not all fragmented, we're not all divided, but we are now a nation. Yeah? O kauhana nui. It's going to be a big work. It's not going to be easy. We're still doing that now, right? We're still working on that now to create our nation. Okay? Ewie. What does that mean in Hawaii? Ewie. Ask the questions. Ask the pertinent questions. How are we going to rule this nation? So I think that's the reason why Kalakaua makes that very strong statement before he's king and offers that to King Kamehameha V. And I think that's why he chose that one over the others that were offered. After that point, Kalakaua, as he becomes king after the election and has that, was right down here, Punchbowl Street, right? You folks know the history, right? The rioting was right over here. So, after that, all became he becomes crowned king, and even that was a little bit kind of like strange. You know, he was king, and but he wasn't crowned to 83, and why did that happen? You know, there's a little bit of disparity in terms of the sequence of events for him to become king. His compositions really start to change after that. He doesn't want to talk about nation building too much. He wants to talk about getting out to places like Waialua, Walaiwa, and enjoying some nice right? That's that song. Okay. Or I want to go over here down here at the harbor and get on my canoes and go paddle and watch the races going on. He doesn't want to think about the burdens of the kingdom, and all of his compositions reflect that. I mean, it's just you see the man, you know, going through the difficulty, reciprocity. Oh, then later on the Biennial Constitution. I just don't want to be here, so I'm going to write about everything else but. You know, and that's what I would like to share about, you know, the compositions of Kalakaua. And Kalakaua, I think, is lifted up by those that present their mele to him, just as was Emma. And maybe that'll be the subject of our future Alii. We would do the mele of just Emalani. Emalani was so beloved, unbelievably beloved. Now we do have two renderings today. We have the Oli of collection. Thank God for all of our wonderful historians that have put together all the Oli of Kalakaua, and we can analyze and look at them. But we also have Brother Puakea, you know, with his group, and they organized the mele of Emalani. And so, if I were to characterize Kalakaua in his mele, and we'll see that tonight when we have a chance to share. It's everything but the kingdom, and it's everything to enjoy my time away from the kingdom, you know, because he needed that. He needed that time to let his mind just rest and just enjoy his life, you know, and be with the people that he loved to be with. You know, Liliu is interesting. You know, she starts to write some very poignant songs about what was going on in the kingdom of the time, and she uses her counter so vividly, and we can see that. I mean, she was a real staunch woman. She had a lot of more than gumption, and would stick her neck out, just like in that song Kahai Kalaunu, or the many other songs that she talked about pure nation building while she reigned as queen, and not very long, unfortunately, you know, about 3 years or even less than that. So that's, I think, we share with you tonight a little bit of their different compositions. I think we should have some Q&A, and let me look what time it is. I think it's 6 o'clock. Okay, we're going to go a little over time. Sorry, Tom. And then we'd like to know if anyone have any questions, and we'll try as a panel answer them. Any questions? Oh yes, yeah, Nanette. And the way I can remember your name, I was saying no, Nanette.
Because he always calls me Natalie. First of all, mahalo for this presentation. You answered two really burning questions I had in my mind that for years, but that's another story. Can you address Nalani Etha's musicality? How did they learn to compose? How did they learn? I know the Queen and King Kalakaua went to the Chief Children's School. Did they formally learn composition from the cooks, or where did they get that? Where did they learn to play guitar? Where did they learn to play ukulele and harpsichord? Harpsichord.
Okay, I'll go quick. When we look at Liliu, I think of all the three other composers, Liliu's treatment of harmony, Liliu's treatment of harmonic and modal key relationships. She was probably the first of the four of them to start going into minor mode, which is, you know, you folks know major. Yeah, the major sounds, you know, la da 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 da, and then of course the minor mode is dark. La da 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 da. Just like tonight, there's going to be a song called Tutu. You know, and then it goes la da dee 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 da dee da. Alii, Alii. She had that, and largely because her piano playing went into a lot deeper into the composers of the classical era, and even even before the classical, something that
But who taught her how to play piano and all?
that influence came probably after the 70s, 1870 with Berger. They were very close, and they would oftentimes play Bach duets together on the piano. And they played over here at Kuuipo Church, and they would switch off sometimes. Oh, you going to take that service? I'll take that service. Oh, you take that service. They had that kind of relationship where both of them interplayed in terms of performing and supporting the service, the musical portion of the service. But they were, I think Berger had opened up a lot of doors for her in terms of expanding her musical knowledge and made it a lot broader. But Mahi and also Emma was involved too in that. Does that help a little? Yes.
The people that were, is this working?
Oh yeah, this got to go right into the.
The people that were leading the Chiefs Children's School, Juliet. Closer?
Yeah,
okay.
Juliet Montague.
Were Juliet Montague Cook
Montague
and her
Cook.
husband Amos Starr Cook. And their charge was to raise the royal children to be monarchs and to be Victorian ladies and gentlemen while they were at it. And various things that they had to know to be Victorian ladies and gentlemen were music and art and manners and dancing and so on. So the basics, Mele, probably came from the Cooks. And then Lili'u especially went on way beyond that. She, living next door to St. Andrew's Cathedral, when I was a teenager, there was a puka in the hedge. You can still see it in the Panax hedge, where Lili'u was said to have gone through the hedge to go practice the organ at Park Chapel. And I think somebody said she was organist here at Kuuipo, but
Yes, yeah, all right.
but she also, played at St. Andrews, and she would have gone way beyond that. The other thing, Kuuipo, is that because they were having to learn to be rulers and sympathetic and good Christian men and women, my cousin, who's also a Cook descendant, Bob Midkiff, in the 80s, sometime 70s or 80s, did a paper saying that the Cooks were talking to their students about the joy of giving, the necessity, if they were going to malama their people, they had to each one take, an aspect and lead it. Lunalilo had the home for the Makulis, and Father Cook actually wound up in there with a kahu, and without being allowed anything sharp because he was scribbling in his journal by that time. He was a victim of acute melancholia. Kapiolani had the mothers and children. The Queen Lili'uokalani Trust took care of families. Pawahi had the schools, and then and Emma and Alexander had the hospital. So they each took, but it was discussed openly that, okay, I'll do this. All right, you do that. That way too. That, which is another thing, and that was, but the music was part of it. I don't know that there are any surviving paintings that they made, but they did do dance, and they did. The music was very much a part of it, and I loved the way you tied it in tonight. It was just marvelous.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. I know we're late. We're really late, but maybe one more question if anybody would like to ask one of her. Okay. Okay, good then. We'll thank you again. A round of applause for our panelists. Kuuipo, Kumukahi, and all of Carmack. But yes, well, we hope you enjoy the performance tonight. Tonight we're featuring George Kuo and Martin Pahino and myself. We'll be really accompanying the halau of our Pohai Suza and her lovely, lovely women. And I think there's going to be a male hula tonight. We'll find out. And then, of course, Ipo Kumukahi and Karen, KLU, and their wonderful group. Who's
Music Hall of Fame Serenaders.
The Hawaiian Music Hall of Fame Serenaders will be here tonight. Okay, and we'll have a guest appearance of Kaala Carmack on one of the numbers. Thank you all. Thank you all for being here. Aloha.
So now you can grab a bite to eat. Please take your